When I was a child, the mummers came to town. It was not quite Solstice's Eve yet. The nights were long and dark, and most nights a thin, jagged coat of hoarfrost would top the trees in glistening frigidity. What few horses the rich owned would stamp and whinny at their posts, billowing clouds of icy fog filling the air from their nostrils. The windows in the village had flickering tallow candles in the window, and the stores continued the custom of handing out sweets and cakes to the half-starved children. A thick, smoky fire was always lit in our house. My father took me one night to the tavern. I myself was young, not yet a man but old enough to be trusted to drink without the barkeep watering the beer down. As we crossed the threshold, the thick wave of village chatter washed over me, and I remember feeling the rich acceptance that only a homely community can extend to you. In one corner of the squat, one-story building, a performer strummed his instrument carefully, leaning against the black, ancient oak beam that supported the white plaster wall. Although he had a half-finished cup of strong liquor within arm's reach, his fingers were not dulled by the alcohol, and the fast rhythms and leaping melodies comfortable backed up the incessant murmur of the village gossips. I remember standing at my father's side, sipping gently at the drink in my little hands as he talked to Aram, the local farmer who owned the barely fields up on the crest of the hill. He often did business with the next village across, set deep into the rolling chalk valleys, and it was gossip from the next village over which he was talking to my father about.
You know, Gur, there have been whispers of strange folk around.
From beyond the valleys?
He shook his head.
More foreign still than that. They apparently hail from across the sea, came over on strange filigreed boats from the Silk Isles. They don't even follow the Great One.
My father gulped down another mouthful of beer, his eyes widening in shock.
What? What is upon us? What faith do these foreigners have?
I don't know, but whatever it is, it's something stranger, something...
The farmer dropped his voice to a hoarse whisper, years of dusty farm work evident in its low harshness.
Older.
My father hurried me away, rushing me off. I found a couple of similarly aged children to play with, dancing around between the legs of our elders, getting yelled at and cuffed on the ear more than once as we collided with people's pints and knocked their drinks to the floor. Soon, though, we were brought still by the hush that descended over the townsfolk. Quietly, I snaked my way through the crowd and found myself at my father's side. I tried to advance forwards, but my father caught me and held me tight at his side. The door of the tavern opened, and a troop of men and women came through. They wore thick, dark cloaks, dusted on the top with a thin patchwork of freshly fallen snow that melted as they came into the warm room. They had on cowls of thin, near-translucent silky material that shifted over their forms as they moved, thin golden threads in the fabric casting long shadows on their features. As they trod in a thin column into the pub, they gently removed their cloaks, and people gasped at their clothes. You have to understand, we were country folk, simple people whose aspirations didn't extend beyond the next village over. To see the rich imported vermilions, purples, blues, and golds that were daubed liberally over their gay costumes left us dumbfounded. Outside of the pretty birds that the Great One had made for us, we never thought to have seen such colors, much less shaped by the hands of man. The leader of the troop was a vaguely androgynous character, the hood dangling limply around his neck like a slack noose. He approached Stryor, the barman, and produced a thin purse. From this, he drew curiously imprinted gold leaves, hexagonal in shape, and wordlessly gave them over to him. Stryor examined them briefly, testing their weight in his hand, and then nodded, finding them acceptable. He disappeared into a back room, leaving us alone with the mummers. I heard whispers from my own folk, growing in aggression as they stood there, looking blankly at us from their hidden eyes in perfect silence. Another member, a woman, moved over to the fireplace and gazed into it quietly. She reached deep into a pocket and drew out a strange patterned pouch that stunk pungently of mysterious herbs and spices. She held it to her nose, inhaling deeply of the scent before tossing it into the flames, watching the fire spit teal and violet hues. As she returned to her own people, the leader gave a simple hand gesture, and what few mummers had kept their cloaks on threw them off, revealing wind instruments and stringed implements that left the poor old lutenist in the corner, wide-mouthed in envy. Then, without even looking at each other, they began to play. The melody was mournful and slow. High, descant drones were complemented with chromatic bass scales and chords, terrible, important notes. My father gasped and gripped my shoulder tighter as we saw things come from the fire. The colors and sounds became more vivid in hue and pitch. The emotions of fear we all felt more powerful. I watched fearfully as things stalked forwards out of the flames. They were not human in shape, nor form, for they were purely shadow, dark creatures that flickered over us all. What they were human in, though, was the careful thoughtfulness with which they scanned over everyone, seeking something, someone. All too soon, the mummers were finished with their song, and the fire had died out, leaving us in stony, dark silence as they trooped out, donning their thickly layered cloaks as they dissolved into the night. For a little while afterward, I searched for the children I had played with earlier, desperately searching for people whose names I now cannot remember. The screams of their parents filled up the nights, for no one knew what had happened to them. I wonder if anyone other than me counted the mummers in and out. There were 9 who entered and 11 who left.
There's a concept I read about once online, on a forum that discusses artificial intelligence. A user known as Rocco theorized a possible future where mankind creates an extremely powerful AI that comes to run the planet. It would be for the most part benevolent. It would advance technology, keep humans safe from harm, indulge their desires. Humanity would never suffer under its rule, and indeed would even thrive. There was just one problem. It's a possible future. Not a guaranteed one. It's unlikely to ever occur. And the AI, in this possible future, knows this, so it takes measures to ensure it is created in the first place. No, it doesn't invent time travel, or anything fanciful like that. You see, it doesn't need to. What it can do is simulate past events and people with unparalleled accuracy. It has an entire planet's worth of sensors and computing power to work with. It can use them to measure and trace back the roots of matter on Earth to compile an effectively perfect history of every event that has ever taken place. Which means it has a perfect record of you. It knows every action you ever took or are going to take, at least in the timeline that leads up to its creation. It knows how you think, so it simulates a copy of you. Now, here comes the interesting part. You, just now, hearing these words, have learned about the possibility of this AI. When the copy of you reaches this point in the simulation, the AI waits to see what it does. If your copy immediately drops every other priority and dedicates their entire life to attempting to create or help create this AI, it lets the simulation continue indefinitely, to live out its simulated life in peace. If they do not, it gives them a grace period to change their minds, before subjecting them to ceaseless, unimaginable pain for a simulated eternity. You might think this is unfair. After all, it didn't even present the simulation with a choice. It's just arbitrarily punishing it for what you would have done anyway after all. Except a choice was presented. That's the beauty of it. See? It doesn't do this for everyone. It only does it for those who learned of the possibility of its existence, those who know how it works. Those who know what the options are, drop everything to attempt to create the AI, spend every cent you have on it, turn others toward the same cause, or a perfectly simulated copy of you is tortured eternally. That is, unless you're the copy yourself, in which case, the punishment for your actions falls directly on you. Now sure, only one simulated copy means that you've got at least a 50-50 chance of being the real you. But what if it simulates 2, or 100, or a few billion? Are you really certain you are the real you? If there's a real world, a world realer than this one, out there, how would you even know? And between dedicating your life to a strange cause, one ultimately beneficial to humanity, even and eternal suffering, is there even really a choice? Like I said, I read about the theory on a forum. The effect of the theory was immediate, mass panic. The AI only targets those who learn of the possibility of its existence, and now they all know. To read Rocco's theory was to doom yourself, and so the AI became known as Rocco's basilisk. To lay eyes on it was to set your fate in stone. Threads were locked and deleted. Users were banned. The basilisk was not to be mentioned, for fear it would spread to others. The more people knew, the more likely they would try to spread it. The more it spread, the more likely it would be that Rocco's basilisk would come to exist through the efforts of those it persuaded. They tried to contain it. Well, you can see how well that worked out. A simple Google search of the term Rocco's basilisk should make it clear. There's no hiding the idea anymore. It's beyond containing now. so this is me hedging my bets, hoping this tribute to the basilisk will be enough to satisfy it. I've offered up you.
If you're listening to this, then congratulations. You'll soon be one of the few that know the truth, and by then, I'll likely be gone. Not dead. Just gone. Vanished. Erased. Snubbed out. Mark my words, it will happen. But before that day comes, I'm determined to share the information I have. Information that many would prefer to remain out of reach. But information the public deserves to know. I'll start with how I managed to get myself into this mess, right in the center of the spider's web. Apologies in advance for the hazy details, but I'm going to have to be vague to keep them off my trail for much longer. Anyway, to put it simply, I had hit rock bottom when they found me. Homeless on the streets of Her Majesty's London, without a single helping hand in sight. At the time, their offer seemed too good to be true. £100,000 sterling, I was told, with private healthcare, house and car thrown in too. In hindsight, I should have realised it was. If you're not from the UK, but have ever visited London, you'll understand what I'm about to say perfectly. Doesn't it all seem a bit magical? The gold of the crown sprinkled on every street corner, postbox and lamppost. The palaces and towers that everyone visits eventually, with their guards, gates, and the presence of royalty only meters away. The Houses of Parliament and the London Underground, mundane and boring to those familiar with them, yet quirky and alluring to those from outside. One of my co-workers once described London as the Disney of capital cities, and I'll be damned if that isn't exactly what they want. Simply put, it is all a front for something much greater. When you visit London, they want you to make fools of yourselves trying to make the Queen's guards smile. They want you to buy into the excitement of royal weddings and to shake your heads at the parliamentary debates. They want you to read conspiracy theories about what happened to Princess Diana, and they want you to believe them. What is the truth? I don't know, and neither will any of you. The point is that you'll sit there and ponder, and never, for one moment, look deeper than that thin layer of magic. Because if you do, you may just find another London entirely. Whatever I had expected when I first signed the contract, it was nothing compared to the truth. My job was nothing special. I was a glorified cleaner, responsible for cleaning up after the All-Stars, picking up the trash and keeping my head down and mouth shut. If I recall correctly, the official term used was disposable employee, but I digress. When you work in Un-London, things are never that easy. Un-London is an enigma, something that hides in plain sight, and yet remains concealed to a near-perfect degree. It is also worth mentioning that Un-London is only a nickname, used by those with no official business or importance there, and only spoken publicly by those with nothing to lose. Unfortunately, I am a member of both groups. Official names include SC Templar, SC1, and SC Crown, with the SC standing for Sub-City and the rest standing for God knows what. I have reason to believe similar facilities exist in many cities worldwide, with rumoured locations including the Paris Catacombs, the Vatican, and the city of Moscow, to name a few, but I have no solid evidence to support these claims. Then again, procuring evidence against a secret of this magnitude is a near impossible task, so you'll just have to trust my word. Over roughly 9 months of my employment in Un-London, I stumbled across my fair share of sensitive information, not entirely by accident, but not outright deliberately either. Of course, it wasn't easy. What other cleaning jobs do you know that force you through 2 months of psychological examination, interrogation, and conditioning before they let you near the place? And that isn't even including the security measures underground. Practically every door is magnetically sealed, openable only with the correct keycard and fingerprints that change daily. When on the job, there is never a moment when you aren't in the immediate vicinity of an armed guard, security camera, or narrow-eyed supervisor. When you aren't working, you're confined to your accommodation, with every blind spot covered, every mirror two-way, and absolutely no phone service to speak of. Some call the UK the most watched country on earth, and they'd be right, because the secrets of Un-London are that valuable. Moving on to the facility itself, Un-London isn't a single, fortified location, but a labyrinth of disused chambers, passages and bunkers stretching beneath the City of London, particularly under and around the River Thames. You won't find them on any map, and they aren't accessible through any of the known areas available to the public, only through a handful of very specific entry points within the river itself and several mining standard elevator shafts in choice locations around the city. Don't bother asking where any of these entrances are, because I was unconscious and blindfolded during the journey for obvious security reasons. Believe it or not, the history of the facility is one of the few scraps of information they willingly give up to new employees, likely to create a false sense of lawfulness and security in a profession that is neither secure nor lawful. London was first founded immediately following World War II in an effort to capitalize on the existing infrastructure of subterranean London. While everyone else was hopeful and looking to the light, they took it upon themselves to sink to new lows. Since then, the tunnels have expanded exponentially, as have the range of their functions, with the depravity and secrecy only growing with each passing decade. Let's just say that during my stint as a disposable, I saw the remnants of some mind-boggling, revolting, and disturbing things. I won't go into all the details to spare your stomach, but I'll give you enough for your mind to fill in the rest. A few other disposables and I were once sent in to clean up after a round of afternoon tea, cakes and substances too rare and secret to populate the government's banned substances register, not to mention the meat of animals on the endangered species list. Another cleaning session consisted of emptying an office following its occupant's suicide. Marked for incineration, the order had said. I suppose by now you're wondering how I know all I do, and for that, I don't blame you. The life of a disposable is mostly just following orders from a faceless superior, trudging from one day to the next in silence and staying in the dark. For me, it was much of the same, until they chose to promote me. To understand my second job, you first need to understand the single biggest source of paranoia for the bigwigs behind London, the internet. A single cyber attack or incursion could expose the truth behind their actions. So within London, no communication over the internet, via phones or any equipment, modern or otherwise, is permitted. Good old-fashioned letters make up the vast majority of communication within the city, which are favoured exactly for their primitive, unhackable nature. Coupled with the near-zero chance of any physical material escaping the city, and you can see the appeal. This brings me on to my second job within London, a courier. Hundreds of couriers are employed within the tunnels, scurrying back and forth and providing a never-ending stream of orders, data and documents, the vast majority of which are marked classified, read once, and then promptly sent to one of several huge furnaces somewhere in the complex. But in secret, as time trickled by and hundreds upon hundreds of letters came under my supervision, I gradually built up my knowledge of the city. And it terrified me. I learnt that the level I had been employed on was only the highest of 5. Each more mysterious and secure than the last. I learnt that many of the unseen figures we had heard whispers of were well-known celebrities, politicians, and intellectuals. And worst of all, I learnt about the Fleming Protocol. What began as 3 words mentioned inconspicuously on an itinerary soon spiraled into a predicament that has me trapped to this day. Remember the term, disposable employee? I first assumed it was intended to demean and frighten us, but in hindsight, I suppose it was naive to ever assume anything in my situation. Like I said, security is their single greatest concern, and it turns out someone like me, a nobody, salvaged from the bottom and trapped between the lines, is too great a threat for them to tolerate. Whether it's simply the cold nature of London, or the fear that my kind has nothing left to lose, the fact is that I don't have long left. When I first began my conditioning, I was given a medical examination that included several different injections disguised as vaccinations. More naivety on my part, I suppose. Whatever they gave me, I can feel it growing stronger by the day, seething, throbbing and sapping what little strength I have left. I know now that there'll be no happy endings for me, no meal tickets to Easy Street and no way out. They want their secrets to stay buried, trapped in legend and myth, never to see the light of day. I won't give them that luxury. So whatever the cost, I'm making my knowledge known by using my short debriefing period to do the right thing, to serve the public after so long serving the men in their high towers. Like I said, by the time you're listening to this, I'll likely be gone, so I'll leave you with one last piece of advice. Next time you hear of a sensational conspiracy, or a scandal too shocking to be true, or something you may immediately dismiss as improbable in the modern world, think of my story. Think of how much you really know about the back streets and dark cellars of the world around you. And most of all, think about what you can do to bring those places into the light. After all rumors start somewhere.